T&T area. Constructed during World War II, the West Virginia Ordnance Works, as it was known in those days, was a sprawling 8,320-acre complex located just 7 miles north of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in Mason County. Its mission: to create and store munitions that would be used for the war effort. It is estimated that when it was completed in 1942, the plant cost $45 million to construct. In today's currency, that would translate to nearly $1 billion. At its peak, the plant employed 3,500 people and produced 720,000 pounds of TNT per day. The site consisted of power plants, storage facilities, dormitories, staff housing, medical buildings, and more. Essentially, they had constructed a self-contained city. But most unique of all was the maze of steel-reinforced concrete domed bunkers, or igloos, that were scattered throughout the dense forests and meandering waterways of the area. These structures were to store the explosives produced at the plant. To hide them from any possible aerial surveillance, these igloos were covered with dirt and grass was planted on top in an attempt to blend them seamlessly into the surrounding environment. But within 3 years, 1945, the war would come to an end, and the factory would be decommissioned. The Army would deed the site to the state of West Virginia on the stipulation it was to be used for wildlife management. And so it would come to pass, and the McClintock Wildlife Management Area would be born. The factory complex was abandoned and left a ghost town, soon to be reclaimed by nature. The buildings quickly fell into disrepair, once fueled by national pride, now left nothing more than crumbling ruins. And what of those 100 concrete igloos? Well, many were simply left to rot, their massive metal doors forever locked, rusting away on their hinges, and still hidden inside, their terrible contents remained. Their secret and volatile forgotten hoard, withered and decayed within, their poisons seeping into the earth. And it was here, on these forgotten roads, among these abandoned buildings, on this poisoned land, that 4 young friends would come face to face with the unknown and look directly into the eyes of a monster. History is rife with tales of the inexplicable and the unknown. Stories so bizarre, they send the fingers of doubt creeping into the recesses of our very minds. Join us as we investigate.
This week in Creepy History.
Hi, I'm Laura Cram, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of the Creepy Acres podcast, this week in Creepy History. And with me, as always, is my funny co-host, Sam Squatch.
No, I'm going to be honest there for a second. I didn't know who you were going to say. I was very excited. I was like, oh my God, who is it? And I kind of forgot.
You're funny to me.
You know what? Thank you. And I think you're pretty funny too.
Aw, shucks.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes I gotta admit, I kind of like having you around.
Oh, I'm grateful for you.
You know what? I'm thankful for you too. For a human, you're pretty okay.
For a Bigfoot, I like you.
Thanks. Hey, look at us. Look at us.
Look at us getting along.
Getting along.
We're so sweet.
I'm having a very good time, and I do also want to say I am thankful for you being, the host of the show and allowing me to join you on here and speak my mind.
Oh, stop. You're the star of the show.
Oh, that's not true.
Yes, it is. You know it.
No, that is not true. I am the co-host, and
How many autographs did you sign while we were out at the last festival?
I don't like to sign my name because I feel like it's a way for the government to track me. So I don't do that. But what I do is when they ask me for my name, I usually sign someone else's name. So right now, there's a lot of people looking at things I signed going, when the hell did I meet Adam Scott?
I was going to say, who's Adam Scott?
That's what they're asking. Who the hell is Adam Scott? I don't know. When did I meet him?
I thought you were going to say like Bill Clinton or something.
Oh, God, no. I used to say Paul Rudd, but then he got the whole Ant-Man deal, and now everyone knows who that guy is.
Oh, Paul Rudd, he's good. So, you know who else I'm thankful for?
I'm going to guess whoever came up with pumpkin spice.
Ugh. I do not like pumpkin spice.
Huh. Okay, so are you just talking about pumpkin spice or anything pumpkin flavored?
Nothing pumpkin. I think it's gross.
Pumpkin pie.
Nope.
Pumpkin bread.
Nope.
Pumpkin cupcakes.
I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure they revoke any sort of suburban mom card if you start talking like that, okay? So you're going to want to be careful who hears this, all right?
Did I just ruin our friendship?
No.
Are you done with me? Are you kicking me out?
You know what? I'm okay with pumpkin spice. I think it's all right. I mean, it's not going to be chocolate or vanilla.
Vanilla's so plain.
Yeah, but you know what? Sometimes it's pretty good. When it's like, you know what? I don't want anything complex. I want simple. Like tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich. It's just, you know what? I just need something to give me a hug. And sometimes vanilla's that hug, but never pumpkin spice. Pumpkin spice is a slap on the ass, and I didn't ask for that.
We are talking about that tall, dark, and handsome cryptid himself.
Oh, well, thank you. This is such a surprise.
With red eyes.
Well, I mean, I don't know how red they are. Probably a little more pink. But, it's only because, they legalized marijuana in Minnesota. It's like, at least try it, right? I mean, come on.
And can fly.
Oh, wait a minute.
He's been seen in West Virginia.
Oh.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. Richard Gere's best friend.
What? We don't like him?
Well, hey, you know what? Wait till some night when you wake up and he's standing at the foot of your bed because he doesn't like something you tweeted about him. The guy's a prick, okay?
What did you tweet?
Look, I'm just going to say this. The guy was in one movie with Richard Gere 1 billion years ago. And now he acts like he's king shit. And if you're lucky, he'll flitter his ass down from Cocaine Mountain long enough to talk to you. Maybe.
He's got that shiny hiney statue, though. What do you got?
Besides apparently bad taste in friends.
You know what you got, Sam?
Chlamydia. Look, I'll be honest with you. Cryptids, we're like koala bears. We're lousy with this stuff, But honestly, that's no surprise. Because if you think about it, if you're like a 7.5 foot tall lizard man, your dating pool, probably pretty small.
But do you know what you have that he doesn't have?
No.
This podcast.
Oh, that's true. And you know what?
You have a podcast.
I have this podcast. And on this podcast, I can talk shit about him all goddamn day. Because he doesn't listen to it.
Deep breath. All right, let's turn it over to Nathaniel Leonards and he can tell us all about your favorite cryptid.
The Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It is a tale as bizarre as it is epic in scale, spanning not just over months, but years. A mysterious and inexplicable entity that would gleefully and spitefully forever blur the lines between cryptozoology, ufology, demonology, and parapsychology. A child to all, yet belonging to none. It is an enigma that brazenly struts before its witnesses while simultaneously refusing to be labeled and defying any efforts to categorize it. In fact, it is a tale so twisted that many disagree on just when and where it even began. The contenders for that crown are as varied as the sightings themselves. For many, the story of the Mothman begins on November 1st, 1966, with a sighting as brief as it was bizarre. An anonymous National Guardsman on duty at the Point Pleasant 1092nd Engineer Battalion headquarters located near Camp Conley Road, just north of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was making his rounds when suddenly he spotted something perched high in a tree near the fence. The man struggled to identify the creature, as it was far too large to merely be a bird. This was something else. It looked more like a man. After some time, the guardsman simply gave up and left to fetch another member of his team to help him identify the creature. But by the time they returned, it was gone. Unfortunately, this tale has only one witness and no corroboration, which is why many believe that the tale of the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, actually began 2 weeks later in the most unexpected of places, 80 miles away. November 12th, 1966. It is a warm Saturday afternoon, not a cloud in the sky, and Kenneth Duncan is hard at work, digging a grave. Not exactly the ideal way to spend the weekend before your 36th birthday. And to make matters worse, the grave is for his wife Ethel's father, Homer Smith. But Kenneth is not alone. He is joined this day by 4 other men: Robert, Bob, Lovejoy, William, Bill, Poole, Andrew Godby, and Emil Gibson. The 5 have gathered at the graveyard located on the grounds of the Reamer Hill Church, a small and simple house of worship overlooking the Elk River, just outside Clendenin, West Virginia. The men have been working for some time when Kenneth takes a break from his labor to admire the surrounding beauty and tranquility that will soon be his father-in-law's final resting place. After all, Smith's funeral services are scheduled for the very next day. As Kenneth surveys the peaceful calm about them, something suddenly catches his eye. Movement. A shape is moving through the nearby trees. He can only gaze in wide-eyed wonder at what appears to be a man, or at least something shaped like a man. Mostly. For from its back sprouts 2 huge wings on which it glides, effortlessly weaving through the surrounding trees in utter silence. Kenneth's mind struggles to make sense of just what it is he is seeing. And then it is gone, vanished, like the whisper of a ghost. In his shock, Kenneth can only stare and fails to alert the others that are with him, leaving him the only witness that day of the winged apparition. Kenneth would share his bizarre sighting with a few friends and most likely would have eventually forgotten the entire event, if not for what was about to transpire. Kenneth Duncan had no way of knowing, but his life, his world, and that of numerous West Virginians was about to change forever. Just 2 days later, November 14th, 1966. It's a Tuesday night, and building contractor Merle Partridge, listed often as Newell Partridge, and his wife are sitting comfortably at home on a small 115-acre farm located along Pike Fork Road near Center Point, West Virginia. It's around 10 p.m., and the couple is engrossed in NBC's Tuesday Night at the Movies, which, on this particular night, is showing the Tony Curtis, Christine Kaufman 1964 comedy Wild and Wonderful. A little over an hour into their movie, the Partridges' tranquility is shattered when their TV suddenly begins to make an eerie, high-pitched whine. One that Merle Partridge would compare to the noise of a generator winding up. the otherworldly sound grows louder and louder still, and soon it becomes utterly ear-piercing. Bandit, the family's 3-year-old purebred German Shepherd, becomes agitated and begins howling and carrying on out on the front porch. Merle jumps up to turn the TV off, the sound now crescendoing to an unbearable screaming whistle. And as he takes the few steps between him and the television, its picture tube suddenly and inexplicably explodes, showering the room in glass. Merle, his ears now ringing, rushes outside to clear his head and to check on Bandit, who is pacing about with teeth bared and hackles raised. Before the man can try to calm the 110-pound canine, it bolts from the front porch and races off toward a nearby field. Partridge repeatedly calls after the animal, but to no avail, and only then does he notice the 2 red lights. At first, they simply look like reflectors out in the field, in the direction Bandit was running. That is, until they begin to spin around and around, as if chasing one another. The man stares bewildered at the lights as they continue their mesmerizing dance, and slowly a growing sense of unease settles over him as the thought creeps into his mind that whatever he's looking at isn't natural. Unable to comprehend the unearthly display, the man retreats back into his home. The lights would eventually vanish, and apparently with them so too would Bandit. For the next morning, Merle would venture out into that very field, and there he would find a 50-foot circle of flattened grass, but no sign of the family dog. Only his tracks circling that flattened area of grass, around and around and around. Despite an exhaustive search, Merle is unable to find any sign of Bandit. Furthermore, he is also unable to find any dog tracks leaving that circle. It is as if Bandit was simply swallowed up by the night. But for many, there is no question when the story of the Mothman truly began. For them, it starts with the story that would bring the winged terror of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to international attention. November 15th, 1966. It's just before midnight, and Roger Scarberry, age 18, and his wife Linda Scarberry, 19, are out for a joyride. They are accompanied this night by another couple. Sitting in the back seat of the Scarberry's black 57 Chevy are their friends, Steve and Mary Millette. The four are out doing what young adults used to do late at night in small-town America before the cell phone. They are simply out, cruising the back roads looking to see if any of their other friends are also out driving around. Inevitably, their path takes them to the maze of dark and secluded roads of the TNT area. 20 years prior, during World War II, it had been a huge munitions factory. However, now it sat abandoned, a sprawling, empty husk, haunted by shadows and crumbling reminders of ages past. But now, in 1966, it had become a popular destination for the youth of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The long, straight stretches of empty road were perfect for drag racing, and further back, under the shadows of the tall trees, young lovers could hide away from prying eyes. But on this night, the Scarberrys and Millettes would find the roadways empty, and the isolated houses that dotted the area were dark. It was now midnight, and the two couples had given up any hope of finding anyone else out here in these darkened roads. So Roger had turned his car around and was beginning the long drive back to Point Pleasant. And as the Scarberry's car crested a small hill near the old power plant, the two couples were greeted by the sight of something standing in the middle of the road.
God, what is that?
As the four peered out into the darkened night, they were at first perplexed and then horrified by the inhuman form standing there before them. It was grayish in color, stood 6 to 7 feet tall, and from its back sprouted 2 huge bat-like wings. But it was the eyes. The eyes would haunt them forever. 2 inches round, 6 inches apart, and glowing red.
What is that?
The creature quickly shuffled out of the road and waddled toward the open door of the power plant. It was moving quickly, but couldn't seem to keep its balance, as if it wasn't accustomed to walking. And then their awe gave way to terror.
Let's get out of here! Let's go!
And with that, Roger hit the gas. The engine of his 57 Chevy roared to life, and down the dark, narrow roads they flew. Roger cranked the wheel, swinging them onto Route 62. The car now up on 2 wheels as it took the turn. The Scarberry's car hurtled south, heading directly for Point Pleasant, and as they reached the first bend in the road, the four were met by a ghastly sight.
Help!
There, ahead of them, was the creature,
How did it get in
or a
front of
similar
us?
one,
Help!
standing on a hill. And as the Chevy's headlights hit it, the being spread its wings and seemed to shoot straight up into the night sky. Now, the teens were in a full panic. Roger was pushing his car faster and faster, 90, 95, 100, 105 miles per hour, and faster they went.
I'm trying!
The mallets, looking out the back window, could see the creature. It was following them, gaining on them, but it wasn't even flapping its wings. Despite Roger pushing the vehicle to its limits, the winged nightmare was soon directly over them,
Oh God, it's over us!
gliding back and forth, inspecting them, or perhaps it was toying with them. Either way, as the car reached the lights of Point Pleasant, the creature simply vanished,
Where is it? Where did it go? Where did
leaving
it go?
the quartet to enter the town alone. Roger would notice that during the chase, the creature seemed to avoid the front of his car and his headlights. He would state that he thought it appeared afraid of the light. And while it is easy to focus solely on the physical appearance of the Mothman, its wings, its eyes, what is often forgotten was that Mrs. Mary Millette, one of the passengers in the back seat, would also give us our first description of what it sounded like.
I could hear it making this sound. It squeaked like a big mouse.
What happened next was a blur, but the Scarberrys and the Millettes would soon find themselves at the Mason County Courthouse, where they would report their encounter to Deputy Millard Halstead.
I knew these kids their whole lives, and they were never in any trouble, so I took them serious.
Accompanied by the police, the two couples would return to the T&T area, and ultimately they would find nothing. Within hours, the story of the Millettes and the Scarberrys' encounter would hit the local newspapers, and as the story reached the public, others, such as Kevin Duncan and the anonymous National Guardsman, would come forward. In fact, there was one detail given by Roger Scarberry, the driver, that would catch the attention of Merle Partridge, who had lost his dog Bandit only days earlier.
Funny thing, we all noticed this big dead dog on the side of the road, but when we came back a few minutes later, the dog was gone.
And as terrifying as their encounter was, it would pale in comparison to what would happen next. For not even 24 hours later, the creature that would eventually be known as the Mothman would return. November 16th, 1966. It's around 9 p.m., and Mrs. Marcella Bennett, age 21, and her brother Raymond Walmsley, age 19, are out in the sparsely populated T&T area visiting the home of their sister, Mrs. Virginia Thomas. However, they soon discover that Virginia and her husband Ralph had not yet returned home from Wednesday night service at their church. So, after visiting with their nieces and nephews for a short while, Marcella and Raymond had decided to go home. However, they weren't alone. Joining them this night was Marcella's 2-year-old daughter, Tina, and Raymond's wife, Kathy. As the four leave the Thomas house, Raymond and Kathy stop on the stairs, transfixed by a light in the night sky.
What is that?
Marcella, meanwhile, continues to carry her daughter to the car.
That light. Up there, see?
Raymond begins to try to get his sister's attention,
Hey!
hoping she will acknowledge
Hey!
the brilliant beacon in the sky.
You seeing that?
But Marcella simply ignores her brother and continues toward her vehicle. Raymond and Kathy were still struggling to identify the strange light in the darkened sky when Marcella reached the passenger door of her car. She was carrying her daughter in her right arm and her keys in her left hand, and as she struggled to open the car door, she suddenly noticed something standing next to her. The creature had risen up from behind the car and was now standing only 3 feet away. Marcella took no notice of its feet, but instead, what caught her eye was what she thought were human legs, covered in grayish khaki. Instantly, she realized what she was staring at were feathers. Its arms were wings, and the head was sunken down between its shoulders, like a bird. But this was no bird, nor was it a man. She was staring into the face of an inhuman monster. Marcella turned to run, but after only 3 or 4 steps, she heard the flapping of wings behind her and instantly crumpled to the ground, collapsing on top of her crying child. Her legs had simply frozen in fear. Now, Raymond and his wife, seeing what had just happened, had begun shouting, screaming to Marcella. Marcella fought back the fear, scrambled to her feet, grabbed her daughter Tina, and rushed back to her brother and sister-in-law who were still waiting by the steps. Her knees were badly skinned, and she was bleeding from a wound on the side of her face. The four retreated back into the house and locked the doors. Raymond promptly called the police. Then they heard it. The unmistakable creak of the wood floorboards on the porch. Raymond turned, and there it was, staring through the front window at them. It had followed them up to the house. It began to walk back and forth on the porch, occasionally looking in at the terrified residents. And then, to their everlasting horror, it started to push against the door. It was trying to get in. The house was now chaos. Marcella was in shock, bleeding from a wound on her head. Tina was crying. Their nieces and nephews were terrified. Meanwhile, Raymond and Kathy were desperately trying to figure out exactly what it was pushing against the front door, for it was neither bird nor man, but something in between. And then it happened. Instantly, the front yard was filled with police. But inexplicably, the creature was gone. But the damage was done. Marcella Bennett had stood no less than 3 feet from the winged horror, staring at it face to face. And while she would have no memory of glowing red eyes, the events of that night would still haunt her for years to come. Traumatized by the encounter and tormented by endless nightmares, Marcella would swear she could hear its wings outside her home at night, its footsteps on the roof. She would become convinced that the horror known as the Mothman was stalking her, hunting her. Such was the price for staring too long into the abyss. Mary Heyer, a reporter for the Athens Messenger, where she wrote the newspaper column Where the Waters Mingle, would take on the enormous task of covering the numerous Mothman sightings as well as the other bizarre and strange happenings about town. However, she would not be alone in this mission. Others, such as authors Gray Barker and John Keel, would also soon find themselves catapulted into the fray. And it was through the work of people like them that stories such as these would live on. Sadly, while people may never agree on exactly when the story of the Mothman truly began, we do know when it ended for many. 4:58 p.m., December 15th, 1967. It was a Friday, and rush hour traffic in Point Pleasant was at a standstill. The traffic lights downtown had malfunctioned, and cars and trucks were backed up, bumper to bumper, across the Silver Bridge, which stretched over the Ohio River, connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio. Many were simply getting off work, while others were just finishing their shopping for Christmas, when suddenly there was a loud noise. The bridge gave a shudder. And then, the entirety of the 2,200-foot-long Silver Bridge simply came apart, collapsing into the freezing waters of the Ohio River, waiting 30 feet below. In all, 46 people would lose their lives. Point Pleasant, West Virginia was a small town, barely 5,500 citizens, and 46 had just died in an instant. Everyone in town knew someone who had perished that day. It was the deadliest bridge disaster in modern history. For many, this is the day the story of the Mothman ends. And for some, it is the day that solidified the idea that Mothman was a harbinger of doom. In the end, over 100 witness reports would be documented about the bizarre and unearthly entity known as the Mothman. It would frequent the TNT area, and it would be sighted on roofs, in trees, and in even one case, it was claimed to have appeared in a man's bedroom. And with these reports would come utterly mind-bending tales of paranoia, premonition, poltergeist activity, animal mutilations, and stranger things still. But those are tales for another day.
That was wild. Wild.
I hate to admit. That's pretty exciting. That's pretty cool.
Okay, so after hearing Nathaniel Leonard's tell us that story, or stories, I should say, do you still have a beef with the Mothman, Sam? Has that changed your mind?
You know what? Here's what I'm going to say. That the important thing of that story to me is not Mothman.
Is it Bandit?
I care a little bit about Bandit.
A little. He's a dog. Come on.
Yeah, and I'm sure Mothman found him very tasty. I don't know. The point is this. What I'm trying to tell you is this.
Okay.
Okay, now hear me out. Hear me out. All right. Listening to this, I went way down a rabbit hole. All right. And it started getting the gears turning. Okay. Now, I don't want to sound like a lunatic here, but just hear me out. All right. Now, you know that very famous photo of the Millettes and the Scarberries, right? The black and white yeah.
picture of them all standing there.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, where it's the four of them standing there. It was the one that they put in the newspaper.
I got it up.
We got to make sure we put this in the show notes because everyone needs to see this. Okay?
I will.
All right. So you see that photo, right? The four of them just standing, right? Right.
Yes.
Now,
I'm looking.
Hear me out. Listen to me. Shaggy, Daphne, Fred, and Velma. It's Scooby-Doo. It's freaking Scooby-Doo. I mean, look, it's right there. It's right there.
They're just missing Scooby.
Oh, are they? Because I think Bandit would like to have a word.
The dead dog.
And besides the fact one's got the big glasses that looks just like Velma's glasses, okay? Now take that aside, all right? Take that aside, okay? Now, look at it like this. You got 4 young adults, 2 boys, 2 girls, going around like abandoned buildings and stuff, okay? Driving around and discovering what? Monsters, okay? I mean, come on, it's right there.
Okay, I'm looking at this picture. Yes, I can see what you're talking about.
Okay, now if that's not bad enough, things are about to get worse, okay? We're going to keep going down this rabbit hole, all right? Because check this out. The original iteration, all right, when they were first putting the show together, the character of Velma, her original name was Linda. Like Linda Scarberry, okay?
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, I know what you're thinking. You think that's just 1 out of 4, big whoop.
Uh-huh.
You know, whatever. Where's Steve, okay? Where's Mary, all right? Where's Roger? You know, 1 out of 4. You got Linda, yay, okay, whatever. And the thing is, I probably would agree with you. I probably would. Except for the fact that Shaggy's last name is Rogers.
Zoinks!
Oh my God, it's right there, man. It's right there. Oh my God.
So close.
So, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, goes into development just a little over like a year and a half after the events of November 15th, 1966, when the Millettes and the Scarberries see an unknown monster outside of an abandoned building in the middle of goddamn nowhere, all right? I am telling you right now that Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, the creators of Scooby-Doo, saw this news story, okay? It was national news at the time, filed it away in the back of their head, and then pulled it out to make this cartoon. And I am telling you right now, Mothman is not a harbinger of doom. He is a harbinger of do. Scooby-Doo.
And Scrappy.
Now I feel like you're making fun of me.
I know. I'm sorry.
Did you for real just drop into the middle of my pristine, perfect theory? Goddamn Scrappy-Doo.
I had to.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, I'm gonna need a minute to get the taste out of my mouth. Ugh.
Okay, I like this. I like where you're going with this.
I feel like Hanna-Barbera owes those families a shit ton of money.
You should do something about it.
I can't. I do not have a legal degree. But I'm bringing awareness, and that's a thing, right? That counts for something, right?
I like it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it should count for something.
Mm-hmm. You know who we should ask is our guest tonight.
Who's our guest?
It is our dear friend and Mothman expert, Steve Ward.
Yes! Oh my God, I love that man.
Me too.
You know, he is a national treasure.
Maybe international.
You know what? I forgot. He's on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files, and that's like an international audience. So yeah, you're right.
Let's talk to him.
Hold on. Before you bring him on. I'm going to be on my best behavior. I'm not going to mention my beef with Mothman, even though I hate him so much.
Calm down.
But for you and for him, I'm going to pretend I don't even know that son of a bitch.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's talk to Steve.
Okay.
So Steve, how are you?
I'm really good. How are you guys?
Great.
Doing great.
Nice to be on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for being on. So why don't you tell everyone about yourself?
Okay, many years ago, I was in junior high in Michigan, but we had we started our own UFO group. And we weren't going to be called a flying saucer group because that was so passé, flying saucer. So it was going to be aerial phenomena, and originally it was Aerial Phenomena Research and Investigation Center. Now, if you sound that out, it's not very complimentary, and we won't want to do that since this is a family show.
Yeah, you have not met my family.
So we switched the I and the R around, and we were in business. And two of us, Evan and Rick, published kind of a pretty decent amateur UFO publication. And we had a wave of UFO sightings in the Midwest, but also in Michigan. These are the ones where Dr. J. Allen Hynek...
Steve, just a second. Just a quick question here. Now, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Now, that's like the Project Blue Book guy, right? Now, what's his deal?
Yes, he was an astronomer at Northwestern University. It was actually dispatched from Project Blue Book. This is back when he was still attached to the Air Force. Now, Hynek had begun to believe that there was something to this. He was very skeptical at first, but he was still tied to the Air Force, so he had to kind of do that dance. He was still, those apron strings were still tied there. They wanted him to kind of diffuse the situation, even though it was actually Senator then Gerald Ford that got mad at the Air Force for not doing anything about these sightings, because a lot of very credible people were seeing these metallic objects and landings and so forth around the Dexter, Ann Arbor, and Hillsdale area. I mean, pretty cool having aliens landing in your backyard, virtually, I remember the press conference where Hynek uttered the classic phrase suggesting that some of the sightings might be swamp gas. And of course, that's all the press needed. The answer to the UFO mystery was marsh gas. And the following November, 1966, was the first major sighting of the Mothman. Not the first sighting, but the one where it chased the two couples down Route 62. And so that's really kind of how it all started for me.
Oh, very cool. Okay, guys. Now here's the deal. This story, I mean, this is like a scab you can't stop picking at. It just goes on and on and on. I have, look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. We obviously can't do everything, okay? Because there's so much. There's so much. So where do we even start with this?
Okay, so let's just get right into this. Let's start off with the gravedigger.
Clendening, there were some grave diggers at the cemetery there. And they saw some kind of like a man-bird thing fly overhead. And, it was a very brief sighting. It has to be creepy as hell, digging a grave and seeing this thing, this whatever it was, apparition or...
Humanoid, yeah.
Yeah. And that was a few days before the really big sighting.
Isn't there a story about a dog missing? Was it Bandit?
Yes, Merle Partridge, his dog Bandit. Now, there's a couple things wrong in the Mothman prophecies, and I suspect, I mean the book, I suspect Keel always talked about these faceless editors that were always getting things wrong. But in the book, it suggests that Partridge saw the Mothman, and Bandit went out and was running circles and then disappeared. He couldn't find him the next day. But what Partridge actually saw were spinning lights. It was suggested that was something more mechanical or whatever was going on there. In the book, it was in one of the earlier articles where John Keel talks about this, it's reported accurately. But in the book, it's changed a little bit. So I don't know what to think about that. But apparently that it all happened at the same time, but I'm not sure we can blame the disappearance of the dog on the Mothman.
Okay, so then like pretty much that same day, really, is the big sighting, the one that everyone always remembers, the one where the two couples in the car. Mm-hmm. Now, is that the Scarberries and is it the Mallets?
The Scarberries and the Mallets. They were out, they're two married couples. They were driving around the TNT area, which is about 9 miles north of Point Pleasant. Now, it's been nicknamed the TNT area forever because back during World War II, it was an area that was a huge complex, and you can check out the old black and white photographs. They created explosives, TNT, for the war effort. They stored them in 100 of these bunkers or concrete igloos, as they call them. And but by the 1960s, it was abandoned. The old North Power Plant was still standing, and the Scarberries and the Mallets were driving on the dirt road by that. And Linda saw what she thought was a man standing in the middle of the road. And she said, "What's that man doing there?" Well, that man suddenly spread his wings, a 10-foot wingspan. They noticed that it had red glowing eyes. It was vaguely humanoid, and it kind of shuffled off toward the Old North power plant. And they got the hell out of there. As they zipped on, it would have been going west on Potters Creek Road, and then south on Route 62, which goes back into Point Pleasant. There was a billboard sign right there, and they saw it standing there. Now, they don't know if it was the same one, or that they just flew over there very quickly, or if it was another one, but this thing chased them into town, flying right over their car. They went to the police station, and they were separated, and they all wrote out their stories, which all matched. And that particular sighting went all over the world, hit the wire services all over the world. So when I was in junior high and high school, in junior high school, I was reading this in the newspaper. I mean, it hit the military newspaper as well, Stars and Stripes. And this is even before Mothman had a proper name. We don't know who dubbed this thing Mothman. Some very creative copy editor. The Batman TV show was very popular at the time, so I'm sure it was just a play on Batman. But whatever this was, really didn't have much to do with a moth.
Okay, now hold on. So now this part of the story, when the mallets and the scarberries are heading into town. Now, is there any truth to the story where they say that they saw a big dead dog on the side of the road, and that Partridge read that in the paper and thought it was his dog?
Yes, there was
a bandit.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, that Partridge was quite a distance away. I don't know that we can conclude that the dead dog they saw was bandit, but who knows? There was another. If you go across the river to Gallipolis and you go a little bit north, there's a road called George's Creek Road. There was kind of a saucer nest, a landing or something, and it actually crushed part of it. So there were several dogs that were harmed during that period.
So hold on just a second. It crushed a what?
A dog. They found a dead dog.
Oh my God.
Ew.
And this thing, you've heard of saucer nests and that sort of thing. Nobody actually saw anything land there, but there was this circular depressed area, like a crop circle.
That's horrifying. Good Lord.
And apparently there were animal mutilations in the area too. I mean, you had strange lights going overhead all the time. You had the visits from the Men in Black. You had missing time. It was a 3-ring circus of the paranormal.
But with a dead dog.
Oh my God, easy there, you ghoul. All right, so Steve, now these stories are hitting one after another. Boom, 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 boom. So we're already, now the next night, it's back again, right? Now this is the Walmsley case, right? This is not even 24 hours later.
Yes, it was Marcella Bennett that went out there with her brother. There was, I guess it was the Walmsley family that had a house there in the TNT area. And they'd heard about the Mothman and thought it was a big joke. So they were going to go out there and try to scare them by tapping on their window. And the parents weren't home, just the kids were. So they started to head back to the car, and her brother was trying to get her attention. There was some kind of a strange light up in the sky, and she just didn't want to pay any attention to it. Then all of a sudden, this thing rose up off the ground, which apparently was the Mothman. She was stunned. She collapsed and actually fell on her infant child, which turned out to be okay, but she couldn't get her legs running at first. So they ran back to the house. They hid in the house. This thing came up and walked back and forth on the porch. And of course, they called the police. And by the time the police got there, it was gone. You can actually walk out, if you go north on Route 62, make a right on Potters Creek Road, and go to the first Igloo Road to the north, and you walk a little way back there to a clearing. You can find the area where that house used to stand, but there's not even a foundation there anymore.
I mean, look, I know birds well enough to know that even if it's some sort of big bird, like a crane or whatever, and it rises up, it's not gonna, and you freak out, it's not gonna follow you up to the. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not like a dog. Right. It's not gonna follow you up to your porch and start walking back and forth.
No. And it's gonna flap its wings when it flies.
Yeah. Because I was gonna say. So at that time, I mean, you had the sighting of this creature, the Mothman, which, as you said, a lot of the early reports just sort of
it sounded like an owl or like just a big bird of some sort. But then you had all this other stuff going on. I mean, you had and because there was stuff going on long before the creature ever showed up. I mean, wasn't there like UFO sighting? I mean, that was just like an endless buffet of craziness.
Yes, and I wish I could have been there at that time to see, at least witness some of the stuff. If you go back around World War I, there is a book by James Gay Jones called Haunted Valley, I think, and he talks about sightings of some kind of like a Birdman around World War I, kind of a little bit further north, maybe along the Elk River area, and but not terribly far from Point Pleasant. And they had like a 12-foot wingspan, kind of a red plumage, human-looking heads, and they would keep their children in for fear that they might come down. And I don't know how long the wave lasted. There's not much information on it. But yeah, there were other sightings, you could call it the Mothman, prior to the November of 1966. Another interesting thing, which is probably pure coincidence, of course, a lot of the Mothman stuff culminated with the collapse of the Silver Bridge in the area. But in 1904, of course, this is before this earlier wave of sightings, the Elk River Bridge collapsed. And the only interesting thing about it is both the Elk River Bridge and the Silver Bridge occurred on December 15th.
Oh my God.
Pure coincidence, I imagine.
Is it though? I mean, is it coincidence? Feels a little suspect. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. But very strange nonetheless. So there's so many rabbit holes you can go down here. And you come right back to the beginning where I just don't know what the hell's going on. But I think we have made some progress because, back in the olden days, things were completely separate. We had people coming from other planets. We had Bigfoot and different kinds of cryptids. But boy, when you look at Stan Gordon's research into Pennsylvania, 73, 74, in Silent Invasion, and a wave of bizarre Bigfoot reports along with strange lights in the sky, it tends to, it just really kind of gums up the works. They were some cases where Bigfoot was shot point blank, would disappear in a flash of light. Mm-hmm. If you go back to 1897, that's when these sightings of these majestic airships would show up. And there was a wave of them, or at least one of them was making kind of a circuit around Ohio between mid-April and mid-May, and was even lapsed over into Sistersville, West Virginia. Well, at that same time period, on the ground, people were seeing these large black panthers, like around Chillicothe, and they were attacking dogs and so forth, never trapped, never shot. And also at the same time, in Adams County, home of the Serpent Mound, people were seeing something they were calling a wild man, which we know is just another name for a Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. So in two cases, you have what appears to be some kind of technology in advance of us. But on the ground, you get these cryptid reports. And you can say the same thing about Lee Hampel's farm right near Elkhorn, Wisconsin. He has taken thousands of photographs of the bizarre things going on around his property. You see these things like drones and things in the sky, and then you get these weird footprints that begin and end nowhere. And he's captured like parts of what appear to be some kind of a dogman-like creature. So you've got these beasts that act like beasts. They eat bait and roadkill, but then as a backdrop, you seem to have some kind of technology. And this is something that seems to show up over and over again.
Lee's evidence of his farm is incredible. I was lucky enough to stay there on the farm. I got to look through his photo albums. I was looking at the cast that he had made. I mean, I can't even explain it. And I'm very skeptical, but there's something weird going on there. It's strange.
Well, you see the footprints, five-toed footprints start nowhere in the snow, split as if two creatures have split apart, and then they disappear.
And then just stop. Yeah, they just stop.
And then he had, there's been several roadkill deer that he's pulled onto his property, and maybe a dozen cases, and he has the camera trained on it. And then a mist shows up at some point. You can see the timestamp.
Yeah, white mist.
And then the carcass is gone.
It's gone.
No drag marks, no footprints.
It's insane.
Okay, now is when we're starting to get into the really weird stuff, right? Okay, this is where we start getting into the inexplicable things, like where you what they call high strangeness, So how does John Keel, the author of the Mothman prophecies, and arguably the reason so many people know about the Mothman, and why we ended up with a movie and stuff, like, how does he fit into all this? Because he's not from there. So, like, what happened?
Yes, so John Keel was actually somewhere in West Virginia. He was trying to track down an old story about Thomas the cat. Thomas the cat apparently had wings, and this boy would let people see him for 10 cents, but bring him out in his shoebox and then open it up. And it was kind of a big fiasco because the one woman said Thomas was her cat and Thomas was a girl. And apparently the wings or whatever it was fell off, and there were these two little bumps on the cat. So anyway, he's trying to track this down. He's talking to Gray Barker, who is the published had Caesarean Publications. He's the first guy to investigate the Flatwood monster sighting and so forth. Well, Barker's telling him about this Mothman story, and he said, no, there's really something to it. So Keel went. He went to the police department to introduce himself, and then he went to the Dewey's house, and they called several other witnesses. So that it was early December, I believe. He was able to talk to several of the primary witnesses that had started seeing this thing and getting detailed reports. He came down he was based in New York, a journalist, and he came down 5 times during that year, November 66 to December 67, and talked to a little over 100 people. And the interesting thing is that the general descriptions were about the same, although some people just saw what looked like a large bird. But the behavior of this thing was odd. It didn't always flap its wings. It did seem to leave some kind of footprints at the Old North Power Plant that Keel found. A lot of people that saw it, they would go home afterwards and they would have an outbreak of poltergeist phenomenon, which is something that happens in sometimes UFO sightings. There was a couple people that went into a trance. There was a banker, heard something. He came out on his front porch. He saw this thing standing there. And he went to a trance for somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. He came out of it, and the thing flew away. A lady.
Was this all in Point Pleasant, or just all around the area?
These were sightings in Point Pleasant, but it was also seen throughout the Ohio Valley and Pennsylvania and so forth.
Okay.
And then Linda Sigmund, who has recently published a book, I think it's called In the Pale Moonlight. She was 16 when she saw this thing, this apparition or creature. And it was April of 1967. And she was out with her boyfriend about 12 miles north of Point Pleasant. And they saw this thing in conjunction with a couple of strange lights, like giant orbs floating around. And she also had missing time.
Oh.
So it's very interesting that these creatures, and if you guys remember the Van Meter visitor, that other winged creature that didn't really look like the Mothman, there was a guy that kind of went into a trance and lost time when he saw this thing as well. So there's some interesting patterns that could be there. What else? There was a lady named Connie Carpenter, and she was very early on. She saw this thing when she went by the Mason County golf course, and it took off straight like a helicopter, didn't flap its wings, flew over her car. She said its face was science fiction like. She couldn't quite describe it. The next day, she was suffering conjunctivitis, eye burn, which is often associated with people that have close sightings of UFOs and so forth. So John Keel, he began to not care that much about what the, in quotes, spaceship looked like. How many doors it had or windows or what the shape was. He wasn't all that concerned about what the creature looked like. He wanted to understand the cosmic mechanism behind these things, because he thought these things may be paraphysical. They might be temporal. And he used the great word transmogrification of energy, and which, you know, and it's always difficult to condense Keel in a few paragraphs in his ideas.
Right.
But it's just very, you know, that's when people ask me, you know, what was the Mothman? You know, I was on Morgan Knutson's show, Supernatural Circumstances.
I love Morgan.
With the infamous Chad Lewis. Yeah, the photobomb guy.
Yeah, the photobomb guy.
And she asked me, well, what was the Mothman? And I usually, my stock answer usually is, I'll go through the litany of all the different ways. You know, it even manifested in a bedroom one time, like an apparition, and then disappeared. So I would go through all that, but this time I said, out of my mouth came, Mothman was an elemental. And John Keel used the term ultra-terrestrial. He borrowed it from Ivan Sanderson. Ivan Sanderson, his friend and colleague, the great British naturalist, transplanted to New Jersey, probably best known for the Abominable Snowman legend come to life, but he wrote other great books on UFOs and the unexplained. So ultra-terrestrial was just sort of a means of suggesting that whatever is going on, he thought was a natural condition of the planet. You didn't have to go off-world to explain some of these things. Perhaps extra-dimensional, but he would use the term ultra-terrestrial and elemental interchangeably a lot. So the more I think about it, it's almost like, and I'm not sure I can give a great definition of what an elemental is, but this whatever it was, sometimes it acted like it perhaps was physical. Other times it acted like it was an apparition or temporal or paraphysical. Although, you know, it's very interesting. If you go back to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who we all know wrote the Sherlock Holmes stories. Well, he was a paranormal investigator in his day. He wrote a book called The Coming of the Fairies, and he firmly believed that these things were real creatures. But it's very interesting. He said something very Keel-like. He said, the appearance of the fairies are largely dependent on the person viewing them. And that's kind of where Keel was coming from, that we may co-create some of these things. Now, it's very likely, very possible that some of these, there's more than one answer for these things. We may very well being visited by aliens from other planets. We may explain some of this, but some of it is almost like, are you guys familiar with the Forbidden Planet? The great 1950s science fiction movie.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yep. The MacGuffin was this Krell race had developed this technology where they could manifest thoughts, and what they forgot about were monsters from the id, the deep inner subconscious. The monsters they created from the id destroyed their civilization. So it's almost like, you know, some of these things, there does seem to be kind of a negative side to some of this, but there is positive and negative. I mean, people experience healings and that sort of thing. There's so many ways to go.
It's never ending.
I mean, my God, this is such a rabbit hole.
You know, there's a whole nother aspect to the Mothman thing. When the prophecies part is very interesting, because as the book goes on, it's not just a matter of UFO sightings and Mothman sightings, that he was talking to a lot of people that firmly believed they were in contact with some other intelligence. You know, some of these suggest that they were actually meeting some kind of an entity. Others seem like it might be more in the way of channeling or something like that. But he called these people silent contactees, because they firmly believed that they were in contact with whatever. Sometimes they were given prophecies that would come true. And you saw that aspect in the movie. They were not the least bit interested in any publicity or whatever. They didn't care if anybody believed them or not. Of quite a few of these people were having, getting these predictions, and they would often come true. The thing is that in so many of these cases, it was almost like the trust of the contactee was earned, was gained, and then all of a sudden it would go off the rails. A lot of these predictions started to coalesce, and there was again, the movie did capture some things. There were Keel was very afraid there was going to be some kind of a tragedy on the river. He thought a chemical plant was going to blow up, and Mary Heyer, the reporter he'd worked with, friend and colleague, she's the one that wrote the column "Where the Waters Mingle," and she reported on UFOs, the Mothman, the Men in Black. She was having dreams, along with another woman, Mrs. Thomason, about packages floating on the water. Another thing that they talked about in the movie. And so there was just the real feeling of foreboding. And as time went on, several of these contactees were telling John Keel, and Keel was becoming, by his own admission, extremely paranoid, because a lot of these predictions would come true. They were saying that there was going to be this big event, this EM effect, whatever that was, and then it was going to be on December 15th, and it was going to happen the moment that President Johnson lit the Christmas tree on the White House lawn. And it was going to be, I forget the exact deal, maybe 3 days of darkness and just all kinds of terrible things. Well, by that time, Keel said he bought it hook, line, and sinker. He was in his apartment in New York, and with bottles of water, and President Johnson lit the Christmas tree, and nothing happened. And then shortly after, the blurb came on the radio about the bridge between Point Pleasant and Ohio had collapsed. And he was furious, because it's like these messages, was it intentional misdirection? Was it just that people can't receive these messages properly? I don't know.
So Steve, just to back up for 1 second here, I just want to make sure I got this. So what you're saying is that John Keel believed, because of all of his sources and his contactees and all these people that he was talking to, that all of his sources, through all that, he had interpreted what they were telling him was that on December 15th, as the president flipped the switch to illuminate the Christmas tree for the first time, that as he did that, something was going to happen. Okay, some massive power outage of some sort. Now, was that going to be like the entire country, or was it going to be just the East Coast? Because now, I mean, honest to God, over the years, I have heard it both ways at this point.
Well, it was going to be, I forget, it was going to be a power failure, and I think maybe across the nation or whatever. I don't remember the exact details. But so many things had, like plane crashes and things like that had come true. He was ready. He thought that that was it. And then when this other thing happened, he was furious, because what good is a harbinger if it can't tell you what's going to happen? I mean, if Mothman was a harbinger and all he's doing is chasing cars, I'll pass on that. I want a real message. I want a real vision so that people can avoid the tragedy.
Okay, just a second. Now I don't want to be the one to defend the Mothman here, all right? But I'm gonna for just a second, all right? And what I mean by that is, in a way, the prediction did kind of come true. I mean, to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, from a certain point of view, all right? And what I mean by that is simply this. Now, John Keel knew there was going to be a massive tragedy on the Ohio River. Now, he got that right out of the gate. He knew that, okay? Where things get fouled up is that he kind of got muddled in the details, So he started on the right path, and then somewhere along the line started following the wrong breadcrumbs. You know what I'm saying? Okay? So, and what I mean is simply this. Right. There was a massive tragedy on the Ohio River, and a lot of people died. And it was caused by the lights going out. All right? But in this case, it was the traffic lights. Okay? You see what I'm saying? So in a way, it kind of was right. But I get it, man. Who the hell's ever going to figure that out? You know what I mean? Because as far as I know, nobody in Point Pleasant was walking around with a Mothman to English decoder ring stuck in their pocket, And if this stuff is interdimensional, well, who's to say they weren't right? But it was like one reality over, and they just, they got out too soon. You know what I mean? Like they exited on the wrong floor.
Which window? Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where you always end up, and it makes me think in the Mothman Legacy, which is a DVD, a documentary by Small Town Monsters. Richard Hatem, he's saying that, boy, when he first got into this, he was going to solve the mystery, man. He was just going to tear it up and find out what was going on. And then, like so many of us, he kind of hit the brick wall. And, it's like Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée was originally an ET guy, wrote 2 great books, Challenge to Science and Anatomy of a Phenomenon. And then when he wrote Passport to Magonia, he starts out by saying, this is not a scientific book. And you can just kind of see the guy going like this, like, what the heck's going on? Keel also thought this was strictly ET in the beginning. But then when he saw all these patterns that show up, and that's the thing I'm most interested in, and I think that when you listen to the experiencers, that don't immediately reject the high strangeness aspects of their experience, you will find these patterns seem to fall into place. Back in the 1960s and in early 70s, I was an ET guy. These things are coming from other planets. Don't give me any I don't want to hear about ghosts or the paranormal or whatever. And then I read Strange Creatures from Time and Space, also known as The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. That's when he starts to get into these ideas of windows, trying to explain how these things seem to kind of phase in and phase out. Well, in the Operation Trojan Horse, he takes it a step further, and he makes it's like when Charles Fort said, "You can begin to measure a circle anywhere." He really starts to show you how all these things seem to be connected, and they're not all separate things: cryptids, UFOs, ghosts, and so forth. So I kind of came kicking and screaming. And like I say, I went to therapy, I recovered, and then I had to go into therapy again because I read Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée. And Jacques Vallée, that's where he talks about different traditions and folklore and makes connections with some UFO experiences, like missing time, for example. Missing time was a big deal when you encountered the fairies. They didn't necessarily give you an unscheduled medical examination, but sometimes you ended up in a cavern or a cave or underground or something like that.
No, thank you.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'll just add that to the ever-growing list of things that I'm terrified of. Oh, my God. Now, Steve, just a quick question here. Now, so we know that the Mothman prophecies and that, the story always seems to culminate in the collapse of the Silver Bridge. My question is, did the sightings stop then, or did people just stop talking about it because they just didn't care anymore because of the tragedy that had happened?
I think that was it. I mean, there have been in recent years after that, would be sightings occasionally, but I think that people's attention was just off UFOs and the Mothman. I mean, it was people had a lot to recover from after that. So there may have been, the activity may have been it stayed at the same level, but nobody's reporting it. But people have seen something like that since then. Of course, people go a little bit overboard. I think any kind of winged creature or apparition is suddenly the Mothman and is suddenly the harbinger of doom. I'm not sure that that Mothman was a harbinger. I don't know what the heck it was, but a lot of credible people saw it and reported something similar.
So do you think the Mothman came to be known like how it is now because of the movie that was made? Do you think that really shot it to fame as a cryptid?
Definitely. At the Small Town Monsters event that we were at not too long ago.
Oh, Monster Fest, yeah.
Yes, Richard Hatem was there.
Yes.
The screenwriter of the Mothman prophecies. And I thought, how cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
He was very nice.
Oh, yeah, he was. And there's a great book written by Brent Rains. Brent Rains never met John Keel, but they talked on the phone often and corresponded. Brent Rains still has an online magazine called, I think it's Alternate Perceptions. He wrote a great book called John Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries. Well, in there, he talks about how excited John Keel was when he read Richard Haddam's screenplay. I guess people had been writing just utter crap, trying to make the Mothman into a monster, and Keel wasn't going to have any part of it. But he thought, he said, they've updated it, and they've got my character, I married her or whatever. But he said that Haddam finally got some of the basic underlying truths, and he was so happy, he was laughing. Now, Richard Haddam didn't know anything about this because he'd not read the book. So I was able to give him this information at that event.
Oh, cool.
He did tell Art Bell that he said he liked the movie, and he said the movie really got was the paranoia that he felt at that time. And if you remember, there's a chapter in the book called Paranoiacs Are Made, Not Born.
Oh, yeah, that's toward the end of the book, yeah.
For a long time, Keel was being forgotten about. And me, I was knee deep in John Keel for years. A lot of his books went out of print, and of course, a lot of the magazine articles you couldn't find anymore at that time. And then in 2002, when the movie came out, Keel, who hadn't done many interviews, he was on Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM, and Art Bell has said that he didn't know much about the Mothman. I'm thinking, Art Bell, you're doing this paranormal show, you don't know. So I was just been very happy that there's been a lot of his works have been republished, and there's a great if you guys are familiar with CBS Sunday Morning, they have kind of a human interest piece at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I got to see a tape of the 2003 Mothman Festival. Bill Geist used to be the guy that would do the puff piece, or whatever you want to call it. He was there at the 2003 Mothman Festival when the Mothman statue was unveiled, and John Keel is standing there in his white suit. Oh God, it's so funny.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was doing some serious interviewing and not belittling the people, and you see him. He's out there in the TNT area in the dark with a flashlight and a map. Now there's a dog kennel back around there somewhere, so you hear the dogs barking in the background, and he says, "What are those dogs barking at?" So it was really quite funny, the way that they pulled it off. And again, you get to see the unveiling of the Mothman statue.
Tell us about that famous statue and that shiny hiney.
Well, it's a very stylized representation of the Mothman, I would say. Although Bob Roach did interview a lot of people about what they saw, and it's made out of stainless steel. It's pretty incredible. He's done other statues of historical figures that you can see on the other side of the flood wall. And by the way, I live on the right side of the flood wall, just in case. But what I do is when I'm there on Saturdays, and I will greet people, and we get into great conversations about this stuff if they're interested. And I will go out to the statue often so that the people can get their whole family in the picture. Mm-hmm. They don't have to send the kid out they don't like to take the picture, So
that's nice of you.
It's
You're a saint.
I'm doing the Lord's work, I think. But then I'm really doing the Lord's work when I ask them if they know the secret of the Mothman, and I'll take them around to the back. And I don't know what possessed Bob Roach to do this, and I can't imagine anybody getting close enough to this thing to give that kind of description. But you will gaze upon what they call the shiny hiney, and people do all kinds of strange things back there. They will slide their charge card through there. I tell them, you better check your bill when you get home. They'll put quarters back there. They slap it, and they do things I cannot say out loud, or I'd be arrested. You'd have to edit it out. And then when they do whatever they're going to do, slap it or whatever, I'll point up to there's on the second level, there's a mannequin dressed like a man in black, which really freaks out a lot of people when they see it at first. But right next to that window is our 24/7 moth cam. So I explained to them afterwards that, everyone all over the world on the internet just saw you slap Mothman's caboose. So,
so you set them up.
Yes.
And tell us about the museum. And you work there part-time, right?
Just on Saturdays. I'll be there tomorrow. Jeff says he's having a group of about 30 students coming in. So, that'll be fun. Hopefully they're well behaved and respect their elders, damn it. But it's Jeff started it in about 2006. It was in a smaller building across the street. He keeps expanding it. It has it has all kinds of articles about the Mothman, the Men in Black, the bridge. It has a lot of displays. It has things explaining who the Men in Black were. It has a glass case with John Keel's white suit in it, which is very cool. And it has 5 documentaries are running simultaneously. He has one really nice viewing room, and the others are just placed in different parts of the museum. And if you go all the way into the back, the Mothman Legacy is playing there. And if you wait long enough, you may see my handsome countenance in there a few times. And I always like it's always fun to walk back there once in a while when I'm speaking on there, and I'll get somebody's attention, and I'll say, "Look at that guy! He's strikingly handsome, but so full of himself." And they do a double take, and we have some fun. So,
do you give out autographs for free?
You know what?
Or do you charge?
I spoke at this last festival about kind of a refresher on the Mothman and John Keel, and a young man came up afterwards and wanted me to sign his Mothman Prophecies book.
Aw. You made it.
I guess. I used my real name that time.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us where people can find you?
Well, you can go to Facebook, type in Steve Ward. I think if you also include Point Pleasant, you can probably find me. I'm not classy enough to have a website. I wouldn't know how to run it anyway. And I do a show called The High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK radio network, along with Andy Mercer, and occasional guest co-hosts like Brandy, that we know from Van Meter.
Mm-hmm. I love her.
And yeah, she's really good. And there's about 3 or 4 years of shows back there. It was a hiatus for a while, but and we're going to be talking to Heather Moser coming up this week, another great person. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So and then also a correspondent. I don't know why I'm called a correspondent, but on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files. And that is also on the same network and many other platforms. And it's, as Sam can tell you, it's a great show.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a good show. But you're also a co-author on the book The High Strangeness.
Yes, Mothman High Strangeness. Mark Randall is the graphic artist, and it covers the year of the Garuda. It covers the between November and December of 66 and 67, all the bizarre stuff that happened in Point Pleasant and the Ohio Valley. And I've also contributed a couple chapters to different books on Big Surprise, The Mothman. You still might be able to find Weird Winged Wonders out there, edited by Timothy Green Beckley. I'm in with some very good company like Brad Steiger, Scott Corrales, and Paul Eno. And the other title, I can't remember. It's Mothman and Other Winged Creatures or something like that, edited by Chatan Noir. And so, and allegedly, I'm writing my own book. A few chapters are partially done. Yeah. It's I tell people it will be out by the end of the decade, and I already have to also change one thing because I found out one of the cases I cited was a hoax. One of those have been repeated forever, but turns out was a hoax. So.
Okay. Well, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
This has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. Good night.
You know, that's Steve Ward. That guy, my God.
So knowledgeable.
Like, I am shocked. I'm shocked that a man so wonderful as Steve Ward did devote his life to a creature as terrible as the Mothman. I feel bad for him.
Okay, put your beef aside with the Mothman.
I will not.
Yes.
I will not.
Do it.
Look, I did while Steve was on here. He is not on here right now. And I'll tell you right now, the Mothman is a dink. Okay. But I understand people like him. I understand they haven't met him. Okay. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think he's as bad as you are making him sound.
Have you met him? Have you met the Mothman?
I have not met him.
Exactly.
But everyone loves him.
Yeah, and people loved O.J. Simpson too. You know, I'm just saying.
They celebrate him. They have Mothman ice cream and Mothman pizza.
Yeah, and people also celebrated the McRib. My point is, people make mistakes, Laura. People make mistakes.
Are you saying I made a mistake?
In what? That you got the McRib or that you like Mothman? Because they're both equally heinous crimes against nature.
I'm not admitting it. I'm asking you your opinion.
Hey, I used to think the world of him too, and then I met him, and I realized he is a colossal prick. So there you go.
You are entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Thank you. And I also respect your opinion, even though it is wrong, because he is a colossal dink.
Well, I think we should agree to disagree.
I feel like that, in a way, is me admitting I lost, and I can't do that because he is a prick, a winged, red-eyed dingus.
I appreciate that, Sam.
Thank you.
So
You're allowed to make mistakes, Laura, like liking the Mothman, because he is a dink, an entitled dink.
Calm down.
All right.
Deep breath.
Dink.
One more time. Deep breath.
Ding dong. Big old dink. Big old dink! Okay, there, I'm done. All right, now I'm done. It's out. I got it out of my system.
All right. Jeez. Can we just...
Okay.
Let's just go. You're making me uncomfortable.
All right. With all the talks of dinks. Is all the dink talk making you uncomfortable?
I haven't met him, okay, so I can't judge.
Yeah, you can. But I can.
Let's just roll credits and
All
get
right,
out of
fine.
here. You can find us at creepyacres.com, and you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, also YouTube, and we're on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which is now called X, Threads, and we have merch at tpublic.com.
Thanks for listening, everybody. And as always, hey, keep it creepy. Dink.